Hello, Regnum Christi members and friends, and welcome to another segment of Have You Met? Today we have with us Fr Todd, and Fr Todd has been with the Ontario locality since October 2006. In that time, he has done youth work, spiritual formation, retreat master, and started programs such as Familia and our young adult group. But most importantly, he's known to so many of us as not just Fr Todd, but as a friend. Welcome, Fr Todd.
Thank you.
Fr Todd, you mentioned in your bio that you grew up in Nova Scotia, the eldest of three and the son of an RCMP officer. You want to tell me a little bit about your upbringing?
Yeah, so my dad spent 20 years in the Royal Canadian Mounties, and he was stationed only in Nova Scotia, so we got moved around a few times, and when he got promoted and so it was a great experience just living in different areas in Nova Scotia. So I was born in Nova Scotia in the same town as Father Thomas Murphy, even though we didn't know each other when we were kids. We only met once we were in the Legion, because I moved away when he was only like one. So, but it was a great experience. And then my dad retired after 20 years to take over the family farm, and he's been a dairy farmer ever since 88, January of 88. So he's been farming a long time. So then we moved to his homestead in PEI. So Mom and Dad have been living there for a long time.
Very nice.
So yeah, it's exciting.
And you mentioned that your parents are very strong in the faith.
Yes.
And always have been?
Yeah, well, when I was about 10 years old, my mom really started getting more into her faith. 9, 10 years old. We always went to church, but I would say we were more, just kind of did the basics. But then my mom really had sort of a personal conversion where she began to really pray a lot more and do little Bible studies with us after supper and little reflections, and then she eventually just started getting deeper and deeper in her faith. And then my dad came along a few years later, and when I was about 14 or so, 15, that's when my father really started to get on fire for his faith as well. And then Mom and Dad just started to journey together in a special way. So it was a beautiful to see that and participate in that as well as a teenager. They initially got involved in the charismatic movement, which was really the only major activity going on, or prayer groups in the area where there was any formation. This was in Nova Scotia. And then when we got to Prince Edward Island, they were still part of that, but they also did Curcio and Marriage Encounter, and so they just got involved in different things, and they started even Familia groups. Once they met the Legion, they were part of Familia for a while, and they did a bunch of the studies and with some of the other families. So they got really much more into the formation aspect and just started growing. And then in 1995, they decided to incorporate into Regnum Christi. My sister and I had both left home a year and a half before, it was Christmas 95 they joined, and we had left home in the summer of 94, and by that point they had gotten to know the Regnum Christi and the Legion a lot better, and they felt that this was where God was calling them as well, to live that same spirituality, and especially as a family. They felt that real bond with us as their kids, and we had kind of journeyed together in our faith, because when they started getting into their faith, Tanya's living here now in Oakville, but she was consecrated for 22 years, and so Tanya and I journeyed with them a bit because we were already getting into our teens, and so it made it much more special. And so anyway, they felt that it was a call that they had too. And so yeah, they've been in Regnum Christi then since, for over 20 years, and going on 25, and been a beautiful journey for them too. And they're quite involved with different apostolates, helping to organize the local retreats for Regnum Christi. And my dad does summer camp in Alaska every year, and for boys called Camp Kodiak, and he also does pilgrimages to Rome at Easter time that my mom's been part of, when they've done mother-daughter, father-son type retreats, and so they continue to stay very active. Yes.
That's amazing, and what an incredible witness your whole family is.
Yeah, my little sister, she's always been involved as well, so She was even a RCMC, a missionary. She volunteered 2 years when she got out of high school back in the late 90s. And so she had great experience, and so she's, very, very engaged in her faith as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm just going to take you a little bit back before your parents got made their commitments. You somehow discovered Regnum Christi. I want to hear more about your journey. So how did you come to discover the movement and make that decision?
Well, and I had done a year with Net Ministries back in 1991-92, which is a Catholic youth organization based in St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Minnesota. And so I'd heard about it because they had sent a team out to the Maritimes. And so my sister, when she was graduating, she says, I would like to do a missionary year. So she talked about doing one with Net because she had done a retreat with them recently. And I had remembered doing one when I was in grade 9. And so I said, I think I'll do that too, because I had already done a couple of years university. I wasn't too happy with where it was going. I needed a year off, and so I said, I'm going to apply with you. So we both applied, we both got accepted, and we raised our money and headed down to the States to spend a year doing missionary work. And so a lot of school retreats, day retreats mostly, and going from different dioceses all over the place. I even came to Canada and did some work. Our team was sent to the Maritimes, actually, which was pretty cool for me. And Tanya was on a different team, and she did a lot of time in Louisiana. So she got to see a different part of the States. And then and that just really kind of set the foundation for me to be more open to God's will and start asking questions. What do you want from me, God? How can I serve you? And so initially it started off just with receiving the call to the priesthood, sensing the call to the priesthood. And that came with a lot of prayer and reflection and just God just working on my heart and giving me more concern for the church and for people and their salvation and a desire to really to love him. And so in Christmas of 92, I started to think about the priesthood for the first time. And then my uncle was aware of this, and he had heard that there was this legionary priest coming to our local area to give a presentation, and Father Kermit Siren. And so he was coming over with a seminarian, and he was going to give a presentation on what the Legion of Christ does. And so he invited me to come. It was just at the parish next door, basically. And so I went, and that was my first exposure. So that would have been in the spring of 93. And then Father Kermit, we exchanged information. He called me and invited me to come and visit the seminary in the June of 93. And that was my first exposure to the seminary. And so that was a very good exposure for me. Wasn't ready to make the step yet to discern, if it was where I belonged. But I knew that it was, something very attractive. A lot of young men. It was a pretty big retreat, big retreat they organized, and there was so many young men visiting at that time of the summer, and it was just an exciting week of my life in that June of 93. And so I went home with pretty strong conviction that my call was priesthood. Not so sure about the Legion at that point, but I had some contact with Father Kermit throughout that year, and then came April of 94. I had gone through kind of a little dark spell in the winter. I was really struggling with the call and really really questioning it and all that. So going through that, I had a local priest that I used to go to for spiritual direction who really helped me, who was very open to the Legion. And he told me at one point, he said, look, if you feel this is where, he says, what do you got to lose? Go check it out. You already know that, you already feel God's calling you to be a priest. Go check out these guys. You like what you see. Go and see. So it gave me a lot of freedom to make that step. And so I went back at Easter time, spent the Easter weekend there, got really special graces, and made a decision I'm going to come back in the summer and spend time in the candidacy to really discern this vocation. I didn't really know much about Regnum Christi per se, because it was just the Legion being presented to me at that point. The Regnum Christi movement was still very small, and it hadn't really exploded yet, if you will, and grown a lot. And so my sister, though, at the same time was discerning the Regnum Christi consecrated, but I didn't make the association. I didn't understand just how connected we were, and I didn't know that it went further than just consecrated women. So it was still, a lot of infant. It was kind of still in its infant stage in those times, and it wasn't until like 5 or 6 years later that there was a real growth in the movement, and it started spreading pretty fast throughout Canada and the States. So I went back in the summer, and after 2 weeks, I knew this is where I belonged. And then I learned more about Regnum Christi through my formation, as they started to explain to us how everything's connected, and what it all means, and in the bigger picture, the bigger vision. And so, and I think that's the same with a lot of people, right? They may meet a priest. That's the real connection at first. They like what they see. They like the spirit he lives, that we live, and the mission that we're accomplishing. They want to help us out, participate, and then they start gradually seeing a bigger picture and realize, hey, I'm not alone in wanting to participate in this. And then they start meeting other people, and they realize, hey, they're part of the same spiritual family. And so I think this is a beautiful how God used that. It was circumstances too. I mean, you wouldn't have internet hardly at all back in those days. We certainly didn't have it at home. There's limited brochures and things like that were available at that time, and so so you had to go and learn by experience, and then quickly it just really took off. So my sister and I experienced that same call at that moment, and so it a beautiful experience for us.
For sure, and it's an incredible witness of divine providence.
Yeah,
the two of you simultaneously, and we just heard her story in last month's segment. So, but the story also reminds me of that saint quote: "Preach always, use words when necessary."
Yeah,
right?
That's true.
So now you're here with us, and you've been here for 11 years. And why don't you share a bit about your struggles and your amazing experiences here in Ontario?
So I was in Rome after I was ordained and a priest in December of 2005. I was in the middle of my first year of a master's program, and so at the end of that year, I got a letter saying, we'd like you to go to the States, put your studies on hold, and go to the States and Canada and work in the two places, to work around Lake Ontario, basically. So the cities that are touching in the States and Toronto area up through Cornwall. And so it was a big zone, a big area to cover. And so I was working with a seminarian for 3 years, and we were doing mainly work with men. So we're trying to build up the Regnum Christi movement, and especially in the men's section. And then I was also doing young men and ECYD, or the clubs, right? So I was doing a lot of that type of work, so trying to build that up. And I was also the point person for anybody interested in the vocation to the Legion. And so that's how I started in those first 3 years. And then after 3 years, I was told that I was going to be transferred down to the States. And then it was right around the time where the States changed all their visa protocol, and it wasn't as easy to get your visa as in the past. And so anyway, there was delays and things weren't happening, and I was sort of in limbo for about the fall, for the fall season of 2009. But during that time, I would make a couple of little trips down here to Toronto, and one of the times, our territorial director at the time, Father Julio, came for a visit, and so Father Kenneth and I and him, we went to visit the bishop, and it was just sort of the annual hello, how you doing? And we actually went there with an intention of asking him, the bishop at the time was Bishop Anthony Tonis, who's now retired from Hamilton. And so we were asking him, can we have permission to have a residence in your diocese so that we can serve the people with our charism? And so he was very open to us. And he gave us the okay, the green light. He said, okay, so start looking for a place to live and just let me know, and we'll get everything set up. And so he gave us that permission to begin living here. And so at that point, when we got the permission, I asked Father Julio, I said, do you think there's any way that my move can be canceled, so to speak, and I be reassigned here full time with the new group of priests that'll be here full time? And he said, I was thinking the same thing, because he was in charge of the States too. So he just canceled my trip, and they rearranged things down there, and providentially I was able to stay here and begin working with the team. At that time, we were, I think there were 6 of us that were designated here, and so I'm the only one from the original group. Well, no, actually, Father Thomas Murphy and I are the only 2 from the original group that are still stationed here, and so yeah, I've been mostly doing Regnum Christi work throughout those years. So trying to working with the adult sections of men and women, helping with all the retreats and such. And so over time, we've gradually started doing more work with young adults and trying to build up that as well, to introduce them to a deeper spiritual life and the spirituality of Regnum Christi, hoping that God will touch some of their hearts, and call them so that we can continue to grow this beautiful gift of God.
Absolutely, and I've seen it flourish over the last year. There's a lot more young adults that are being called.
Yeah, definitely.
So you've done a lot of work with retreats, Familia, the youth groups, spiritual direction. What's your favorite apostolate?
My favorite apostolate? Well, probably one of the things I love the most is just the spiritual direction with people. Just working with them, trying to be there for them, help them grow in their life of grace, and really understanding their own vocation, and really experiencing Christ on a deeper level and being able to transmit that. And then secondly, I really have a soft spot for the young adults. So that's always been something I've enjoyed doing, is meeting them, getting to know them, helping them, because I know it's a tough time. I remember myself, it was a time of a lot of questioning, and it's a struggle. And so just to be able to offer them some form of stability and growth spiritually, and understanding of themselves in Christ is a real grace to be able to participate in that. And because they're young adults, a lot of the ones that initially that I met were university age, so they come and go, right? They graduate, they move on, they go to a different city. I don't see them anymore. I mean, perhaps some you do see a little more often. Now we're starting to get to know some that are out of university and are working. So that's a whole new circle. There's a little more stability there because they're starting to make roots. And so that's where we're at now. We have a lot more that are already graduated. They're setting their roots in the area. They're getting engaged, getting married, little by little. And so this is a beautiful thing to see. So you start getting some from all those different areas and trying to help them just build community and build a real identity as Catholic young men and women.
Great. And so tell us a little bit about what the young adults have available for them right now. Any retreats, any events coming up?
So right now we're still in that infant stage. We started with about a year and a half ago. We started just trying to get some people together. So it's just who do you know, just trying, right? And so we had a few gatherings and stuff. We're still trying to figure out where are we going with this. What's the need? What do they want, really? And so it didn't really take off initially. And then I decided to just get together. I knew a lot of young women that were university age, so we started a young women's group that went for a whole year last year. Started halfway through. 2016 basically. Started halfway through the year, and went through the whole year. And so we were meeting and just I'd teach them to do the encounter with Christ. We just have a talk sometimes on a theme and discuss it. Sometimes we just had I gave them little retreats once in a while, and we mainly had it at one person's house. I think I hosted the Advent retreat, which was a nice success, and we had about 10 or 11 of them come out, which was beautiful. And so that was a really good. So trying to create community. And then from that, we gradually we started connecting with other young adults, and came to a point where I said, when I was talking to a few other young adults that I'm close to, I said, why don't we try again with the mixed group? And so we decided to try. In our first one, we had 14 come out.
That's amazing.
And we were like, wow, this is amazing. And majority of them are guys, which is even weirder, you know. So and so now we've had one every month for the last 4 months. And so our next one is going to coincide with the Regnum Christi picnic up in Mary Lake, so they're going to come for that. And so, but we've had between 10 and 14 each time. And so there's already a core group. They're starting to do things together, form actual friendships. So they're connecting, and that's what we were lacking initially, is just friendships, bonds being formed where they're doing things. So we found a good, I think we found a good formula that's working, in the sense they found it really, because they're creating it, and we're just trying to facilitate it and just encouraging them and trying to keep them together. But they're starting to get lots of momentum. So it's beautiful.
It sounds very beautiful. So if you want more information on the picnic, that's September 23rd, and you can find more information on the website at www.regnumchristiontario.org. And if you need to reach Father Todd, you can go through the Contact Us. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us, Father, before we close our segment?
Well, I think we're discovering more and more in this area that are the real needs of family and faith formation, and how much that energizes us as priests, but also how it gets so many Catholics on fire for their faith and discovering their own mission to serve God with their gifts and their talents. And I think the youth work that a few of the fathers, Father Thomas Murphy and Father Pierre, have been able to develop over the last couple of years, especially in building a lot of clubs and inspiring a lot of people to want to start clubs in local parishes, is really something that's opening the doors to a lot of families to get deeper in their faith and grow in their love for Christ and commitment to Him. And it's going to really re-energize the church in the local area in really beautiful ways that we're still discovering. And then, of course, continuing to, help those families, give them personal formation, spiritual direction retreats, and we also have a program, Familia, which is so beautiful. And I've done a lot of that over the last few years. And I didn't mention it earlier, but that's also one of the things that has been very exciting, just getting couples together and using these programs as a way of just giving us a guide, something to work with, a theme to discuss. And they've been growing. Just seeing them grow and get on fire for their faith is so beautiful. So these are just areas that I've just I'm very hopeful for the growth of Regnum Christi in the Hamilton, Toronto area, and just seeing how God is working in people's lives. So thanks for asking.
Well, thank you for taking the time to meet with me, and thank you so much for your generosity of self. You've done so much service for all of us here in Ontario, and I know the movement wouldn't be where it is without you, so thank you again.
Pleasure to be here and serve.
And we'll hear you next time at the next segment of Have You Met?